On October the 4th, I lost my friend and dive partner Brett Hemphill on a deep exploration dive in Phantom Spring in West Texas. Over the past 15 years, we had shared some amazing experiences exploring underwater caves in Florida. Brett was one of a kind, an enthusiastic explorer, a mentor, an inventor, a walking encyclopedia of caves, all driven by his belief that the best way to protect these special places underground was to document them through photography, video, and survey. Unlike so many explorers, Brett didn't keep his finds a secret. On the contrary, he couldn't wait to tell someone about it. He just couldn't keep it secret. Countless times my phone would ring and there would be Brett with, "Dr. Pitkin, guess what I found?" In so many ways, he was larger than life. After we dragged ourselves out of the water at Twin Dees in 2013, having connected it to Weeki Wachee Spring during a 14-hour dive, he was singing karaoke and smoking everybody else at it in the restaurant at 2 a.m. I would get texts while I was at work with sketches of some new piece of equipment he had designed, or an image from Google Earth with what he predicted some cave passage was going to do. So often I would laugh and dismiss these ideas as being ridiculous, only for him to be proved right years later. It was no accident that Brett and I ended up diving together. Our attitudes towards risk management and careful progressive extension of our safe diving envelope were perfectly aligned. On top of his conservative approach to dive planning, Brett's experience of 30 years of diving in challenging environments gave him the ability to deal with just about any issue his equipment or the environment could throw at him. I've seen him deal with so many problems over the years, including rebreather failures, scooter malfunctions, line entanglements, silt outs, line traps, dry suit floods, regulator failures. Just about anything that can happen had happened to him, and he could deal with it, even 400 feet deep or 5 miles from the cave entrance. More recently, Brett started putting more energy into helping new aspiring explorers in any way he could, loaning them equipment, advice on where to look for new passage, talking to landowners, even his trademark cave maps drawn on napkins at fast food restaurants. He was always excited to know what another explorer had found, and many of his protégés are used to the experience of seeing 5 missed calls from Brett on their phone after a dive. Sadly, all that is over. But we can console ourselves with the fact that Brett died doing what he most loved, exploring a spectacular deep underwater cave, and in the process breaking the record for the deepest underwater cave in the United States. A couple of months earlier, he recorded this episode for the Off-Gassing podcast, and I think you'll agree his enthusiasm, his deep knowledge of underwater cave exploration, and above all his humility comes through loud and clear. I'm sure that if he could say anything to us now, it would be, don't stop exploring, and make sure you tell everyone about it.
And I keep pushing this thing off of me, and all of a sudden, I look over my left shoulder, and I just see a snout with teeth. And I'm like, oh my God, there's an alligator on my back. And this was in a swamp cave.
Off-Gassing, a scuba podcast with host Nick Hogel. Gators, caves, explorations, and much more as I speak to Karst Underwater Research President and Divesoft Ambassador Brett Hemphill. Thinking 3 moves ahead, close encounters with wildlife, guiding a new generation of explorers, and an armadillo? Please enjoy this next episode with Florida's very own Brett Hemphill. Brett, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing really good this morning. It's hard to believe we're 12 hours apart, but 9:30 here. Well, actually 9:40 here and 9:40 in Malaysia. It's nice to meet you, Nick.
Yeah. No, it's an absolute pleasure to meet you, and no, I really appreciate you coming on to the podcast today. I'm sure you got a pretty busy schedule just in general, so thank you very much. I really appreciate you participating in the podcast today. But my first question that I usually like to ask all my guests is, tell me how and why you got into scuba diving. Tell me about that first experience, that first breath. What got you into this sport?
Well, originally, when I was young, I was in a group that was out of my high school, and it was they called it adventure sports, and we went caving. And we went caving in Indiana, and one of the caves we went into was called Salamander Cave. And it was just a beautiful cave, and at the end of this cave, you crawl through this massive breakdown, and you end up in this room where there's this lake, and you could clearly see across this lake and see where it ducked under and continued on. And so from even a young age, I was already kind of like, wow, I was fascinated with caves. And I had an uncle who lived here in Florida, which is where I was born originally. He would always regale me with these incredible adventures that he had, going into sinkholes and places here. And so I think at the age of 19 or 20, I got certified. And shortly after that, I was in Hernando, Florida, and my roommate at the time goes, "Hey, you want to go dive this sinkhole in the river?" And I was like, "Oh, sinkhole in a river? Well, why not?" We were bored. There was nothing to do. And and we went into this sinkhole, and I always tell people, if you can imagine submerging the Greek Parthenon or one of these great, old structures and just be weightless and floating through that, really no fish, and a lot of people who love reef diving and stuff, they go, "Oh, it's just a bunch of wet rocks," but it just, right after that, I was like, I've got to get cavern certification. And so and quickly went through all those certifications, and that's how it happened. And then shortly after that, I just wasn't really interested in going into caves where people had been before. I had an instructor who tried to convince me to go to Yucatan. He says, "There's no more exploration in Florida. It's done. You need to move to the Yucatan with me." His name was Steve Gerard. But I couldn't. I had already met, at that time, the love of my life, and we were going to be, I knew I needed to be here. So off the coast of Florida, there were these submerged springs, and there were some people already digging on one, and that was called Crystal Beach. And my fascination with finding and identifying, caves that hadn't been found before in Florida, that's where it all began, and it happened really quick. It really did.
Obviously, the cave environment didn't really, because I know for some people, they kind of get in there, they might get like a little like, this is where they need to kind of build up to it, but you were just instantly drawn in, it seems like.
Yeah, which brought up a lot of problems. I will tell you, I had a lot of, it was a learning curve, let's put it that way. Fortunately, I had the right training, but the first cave, as I said, Crystal Beach, I knew I needed redundancy, whether or not that was air and light. The caves here in Central Florida are a little more dynamic as far as the morphology and the silt, and so it was progressive, I'll tell you. Within a few months, we were learning how to take our equipment off and push it in front of us, but, that fundamental training of always make sure there's a redundant air source within a hand's reach, watch your air calculations, have a backup light. And for this small group of people I was working with at the time, it was exciting. It was a really exciting time in my life. We would literally live at these coastal caves, one in particular, and every night we'd come home, we'd go, "Boy, that was a close call," but we learned something, so we'd implement, whatever the learning curve was and just keep pushing forward.
How were you finding these caves? Like, how was it just kind of word of mouth? Were you, going to the library and studying? Like, how are you finding like these, caves that haven't been found before?
Well, unlike now, we have LiDAR and a lot of different things, but ultimately, even now, when you find these coastal caves and caves that are in these really, isolated areas, it's just word of mouth through usually a fisherman or a hunter or someone who's just been out there and go, "Oh, yeah," and especially back then, most of them we'd hear about from a crab fisherman who would say, "Yeah, I was just off the coast and there was this little boiling hole," and we would immediately go, "So, describe a hole, a basketball big enough to put your fist in." And he goes, "Oh, heavens no, a human body could fit in it, but who would want to do that?" We were like, "We would."
That's awesome. So when you started exploring these caves, let me bring it back a little bit. So when you learned your cavern, were you in back mount? I'm assuming back mount doubles?
That's correct, yes. Side mount even, obviously side mount came over in some capacity from the UK, Wookiee Hole, and some of those early caves there, where the divers were just simply clipping bottles off to more or less rappelling harnesses. There really wasn't buoyancy compensation. The great thing about the old British side mounters and sump divers were they weren't really concerned about visibility because they were hoping to get to the next dry pocket soon. I think the evolution of side mount with buoyancy and trim really came to focus here in the United States with early divers like Woody Jasper and Wes, and they took those early British designs and said, we are trying to conserve visibility because our caves here are going to stay submerged. We're not looking for the next air pocket. And so there was definitely an evolution. You got to really give credit where credit is due. I mean, the Europeans and the British especially started the whole putting the bottles on the side and stuff. But for me, we quickly finished the training, which was, like you said, we were in back mount. And I just kept finding these areas that were either far away, where we had to kind of move equipment, or too low. And so I'd say within about 3 years of my training, I was already, pushing bottles and no mounting and side mounting. And as I said, just progressively doing what I had to do in order to get into some of these new environments.
Do you remember an exact moment when you're like, okay, the tanks have to come off the back? And was it like a not a light bulb moment, I should say, but like, I mean, that must have been a pretty wild concept, learning one way. And because today, for me, I've taken a side mount class. There's a lot of knowledge out there today, but when you were kind of starting, like, that must have been, I would think, like a radical idea, but like I'm not sure. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
The first cave I and my friends at the time were exploring was Crystal Beach, and we used no mount and side mount techniques to get in, but we still hadn't really gotten to the point where we could take that equipment configuration and stay neutrally buoyant, and especially then was clipping off bottles. Even today, there's special techniques we have to use if you're not using a rebreather. There's special techniques you have to use when you're side mounting to stage bottles. Back then, we basically would take our back mounts, wrap bungees around them, make sure there was an alternate breathing source on the front, the back, a light, and we'd push them in front of us until the environment got big enough and we'd put them back on. It wasn't until years later, it was actually back in the same cave when Dive Right, the company Dive Right at that time, really had focused on incorporating buoyancy and side mounting techniques, and I was following some people doing that. And so it was probably that same cave or somewhere up the coast of Florida. And like I said, it wasn't as much because the environments were tiny and small. It was just getting the equipment there. I mean, you can only walk so far through the woods with a set of doubles on your back. And so, it was just out of necessity. I'm just trying to think. I like small cave, but ultimately back then, it was, let's get past the small part so it opens up and it gets bigger again. We were finding a lot of cave that, near the entrance of most caves is where the most restrictions are because, naturally things fill in. Once you get through that entrance sanctum, things will open up inevitably. But I've never been one of those divers who just enjoy going through thousands of feet of tiny little scrapey cave. There's got to be some payoff, and there were several caves like that. One of the next caves was Warner Boyce, where it had a very small restriction, and then the next thing it opened up into these massive, deep rooms. And we were right back to let's put our back mount stuff back on. The first place in Florida I really implemented side mount for long periods of time was on the Swanee River. I'd probably say places called like Bathtub Spring, Swanee Blue. There's just a number of really beautiful caves off the Swanee and the Withlacoochee in North Florida that remain relatively small. You don't want to go in there and tear them up. So I think a lot of those smaller caves off the Swanee River in northern Florida were kind of where I really honed a lot of my side mount skills. as an early diver.
Okay, and so that, well, I guess that's going to kind of lead to my next question, the armadillo.
So early on, I had a dive right rig where Lamar basically incorporated a wing to a harness, but the problem that I encountered with some of those early designs were you get into a small space, and unless you could spin clockwise or counterclockwise and get out, if you tried to back out, the tanks would kind of lift up off your butt, and you could get keyholed. And I was like, I really need a more rigid connection down where the lower part of the tank connects. And so Armadillo really started with creating a more rigid, supportable connection. And secondly, I wanted a connection where I could actually clip the bottles off and kind of walk through the woods versus having that be like on just a waist belt. And so Armadillo really started with that kind of connection on the lower part of the back. There were designs before it. Mark Long, he's an excellent explorer here, and Mark made a plate along with Bill Reneker, and the plate basically was, it had a tri-glide on top, and then it was approximately a 6-inch plate, an aluminum plate with a D-ring on the bottom. But even the plates I didn't like, because once again, if you had to back out, line could get under those plates, and I didn't want line kind of going back under the plates. And I was rappelling for many years, and I said, I want to incorporate a butt pad where line can't get under the connection and you can back out. And so Armadillo really was just the connection point in creating that real rigid triangular piece of webbing that didn't allow line to get under it and gave you a lot of support getting in and out of the water. And more or less, if you did it right, it kept the tanks from kind of lifting up off your back if you had to back out of a cave system. And then incorporating the wing and stuff like that, that was kind of a collage of myself, Kurt Bowen at the time, and Jacob Ryacek, who used to be the owner of Golem Gear. It wasn't completely my concept when it came to incorporating the wing. And back then, we didn't have baffles, so we used a horseshoe wing. Now they have baffles they can incorporate in a lot of the making of the wings, and they have just a bag or a donut. But I tell you, it was a great rig. The other part, too, is I didn't like having an elbow on my shoulder. I'd already been through several rigs where I literally sheared that plastic elbow off because I'd put my head sideways and grind, and all of a sudden I just heard bloop, 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 bloop. So really wanting to get that inflation down and out of the way across the top of the shoulders was important as well. And I don't know if I can take... I think Jacob Ryacek came up with the idea of putting the inflator down low. Of course, on the Armadillo, you had to lift on one side to get gas, and we had a pull dump that was underneath it, so you didn't shear it off. So you got to give credit to the people who helped you design stuff. And I never had the money at that time to go to fabricate it. And so Kurt Bowen, in conjunction with Ziegel, decided to make the first run of that unit called Armadillo. That's kind of the background.
That's a great story, man. I do have a question though. So obviously me, like I've explained, I'm not a cave diver. So when you get to a point where you're trying to back out, what's going through your head at that moment? Are you just kind of pushing your way through, and then you get to a point where you're like, okay, can't keep going further, I need to back out, and then what's the mindset of something like that?
Well, that's a great question. There's been several unfortunate fatalities with side mount divers where their ego just pushes them further than the morphology and the environment will allow. And they say when you play pool, you're not supposed to be shooting the ball and not thinking. You should know at least 3 shots ahead of you of what you're planning on doing. And so when you're in side mounting and you have the correct visibility, especially in a completely submerged system, you can't always anticipate as it's getting smaller that around the corner there's going to be an area big enough to turn around. In fact, that old saying, there's old cave divers and bold cave divers, but there aren't any old, bold cave divers. And the reality is with side mounting, I've never been one of those people. I mean, if I look out in front of me and I cannot see an area where I can physically turn around, at that point, I might even remove a bottle or just say, there's diminishing returns, because I can look ahead and say, could I back out? And even you got to remember also, when you're backing out, you can't reel backwards. I mean, there's been a lot of places where I've literally had to lock a reel off and leave it in the dirt. I don't do a lot of that. I did a lot more of it when I was younger and more stupid, but there's been fatalities. You've got to know how you're going to get out of a space before you get into it, especially a restrictive space, where there may be silt or whatever. And there's been a lot of places. I was in Missouri one time and got into a space where rocks slid in behind me. We were talking about armadillo earlier. Another thing we did with armadillo was we made an H harness. And the great thing about an H harness is if you just pop the belt buckle, you can take both your hands and push the harness off your shoulders. There's been several times where I would literally leave both of the tanks on the armadillo, kind of peel out of the H harness with the long hose in my mouth, swim forward, turn around, and then push the entire rig back out and have to put it on. Because some of the earlier side mount harnesses, even some of the new ones, once again, you're not training people to completely swim out of their buoyancy compensation and bottles. If you get into that situation, you don't want the learning curve to occur right when the bad stuff is happening. And so, sorry for the long answer to a good question, but yeah, you've got to really be able to telescope, and in your mind's eye, you've got to know how you're going to get out of that space before you get into it. And if you keep putting yourself in situations where you're like, wow, how do I get out of this? Then you're making a lot of mistakes. I mean, bravery and bravado really shouldn't have anything to do with navigating underwater and overhead and confined spaces. And just my opinion, though.
No, that was definitely not a long answer. That was a great answer, because especially for me, because when I think about when I see videos like the social media world that we live in these days, everybody's posting stuff, and you'll see people going through these really small restrictions, and in my head I'm just like, I probably would have stopped it before I even got to that point. And so maybe that's why I'd probably never be an explorer, because I don't know, I feel like sometimes there's that you kind of have to have that drive to be like, just a little bit further, and then it opens up into some big amazing room, So,
yes.
And I'm sure, have you been in those moments where you're like, something's telling me I should turn around, but something is louder telling me to just keep going forward?
Those moments of me telling myself I need to turn around occurred a lot more after I started having kids, But no, I mean, the desire of exploration, I mean, people have to, exploration, especially depending on the area you're in, I don't know. I think exploration there's a basis. Some people explore, because I always tell my kids, exploration is a very selfish endeavor. And it's one of the few selfish endeavors that's not really affecting other people, unless you kill yourself and you don't come home. But when you're in an underwater cave and you're seeing something for the first time, and whether or not you're processing this thought while it's occurring, that no one's ever been here, wow, it's a new place, wow, it can become very addicting. As we mentioned earlier, you can find yourself quickly in a situation where either you're stuck, the line, a lot of what happens to cave divers too is the passage will have tiny seams and crevices, and if you're not careful to anchor the line properly, you can turn around in zero visibility, and the line that you laid to get in is not in the same place it was before. And in zero visibility, you're suddenly now on that line, and it's in a seam or a fracture, and you have no idea. And of course, your gas is depleting. We're not talking about rebreather here. And your gas is depleting, and now you're trying to figure out how to get out of that. And of course, line placement is just as much a part of reading an environment as, the morphology itself. When you're going in to these low spaces, overhead environments, you have to lay that line in your mind that you're going to have to be exiting in zero visibility. So a person who just goes in and leaves the line laying on the floor and it's like, oh, new cave, they could turn around and find themselves in a world of hurt for sure. And I tell everybody and most people is cave diving should be progressive. And I have a friend named Doug Ebersol who's a great photographer. And when I met Doug, he works at KISS. I think he's just become he had a TDI award the other day. But when I met Doug, he was like, I will never cave dive. I am never interested in cave diving. He says, wreck diving is something I want. I said, well, you should take a cavern course. I said, because in a cavern course, they really teach you about how to, work with lines and how to lay lines. And I said, it would be real beneficial. Well, Doug finished his cavern course and suddenly was like, I like cave diving. and now, I always wondered when I was younger what they meant by never say never. Now I understand it, because the moment you say never, you will quickly find yourself going, wow, I really like this, when I didn't think I would.
No, that's a great story, and because I can relate a little bit, just being from Texas, we have Mexico right there in our backyard, and obviously you hear about the cenotes as a diver and everything, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'll make it down there and I'll check it out. And I was down there on a scuba diving trip, and I'm like, I'm here, I might as well check these out. But in my head, I was like, I could never see myself getting into this sort of diving. But and just in the cavern zone, because I'm not qualified, I'm not certified, so they'll take the open water divers through the cavern zone, and instantly, as soon as we got in there, I was like, I can see the appeal. And to be honest, too, I that was the first time I really saw a side mount diver. And I was like, man, I really want to try that. And when I went to go take my intro to tech course, my instructor was like, well, why do you want to do side mount? They're tools for a job, right? Like the side mount, he was pushing me to get the back mount doubles. He's like, oh, you should learn back mount doubles. Like, why do you want to do side mount? And to be honest, I really didn't have a reason. I was just like, because I think it looks cool. So it's something that like I want to try, and but it's weird. I can understand that, because the more I'm exposed to this world, I'm just like, man, I really see the appeal, watching these videos. And then like that video you sent me where it's like, you're going through this passage and all of a sudden, kind of like you're saying, it's like this big cathedral underwater, and that has to be an amazing feeling to just see something like that. Yeah. And so there was a couple things that you'd mentioned that I want to go into, because I'd like to ask you a little bit about rebreathers, but I just wanted to bring it back a little bit. So I found, and this is just me, I don't really know much about Florida. I've been there a few times, but I found this video. It's basically like Brett's Cave Diving Wrong or something by Kurt Bowen. And so my question is, I don't know, was that like an alligator or what was going on there?
We were doing a film shoot for Nova, and they wanted to get this sequence, and that was at Ruth Spring. And we drove out there, and the production company was there, and it had been raining, and there just wasn't a lot of places to go. And one guy, as soon as we get there, we see this small gator. I mean, he wasn't barely 5 feet long, and he swims into the cavern. And all the film crew, they're not from Florida, and they're like, "Oh, we're not getting in there. And what are we going to do now?" I was like, "I'm just going to jump in and get the gator out of the way. I'm not going to make this the reason we can't." It was a very quick sequence we needed to get. Of course, being reality-based TV, they wanted to make sure they captured me removing the gator, which I don't harass wildlife at all. I don't. But I was just really irritated with these people who weren't from Florida that weren't going to go into the cavern because this silly little 5-foot gator was there. So they filmed me. I just jumped in with a T-shirt and a bottle, and I just went down and, carefully grabbed him and pulled him out, and, we got the shot. But I think they decided to make a spoof reel about Brett Hemphill doing all these things wrong, and I think it's funny. But that's the backstory to that. But we just I was irritated, and we needed a place to do like a real 10-second sequence, and I was like, I am not going to drive around because you guys won't get in the water with a alligator not much bigger than a lizard. And so anyway, so that's the backstory on that.
Well, my question there is, so are you running into a lot of gators? And obviously, because I'm not gonna lie, if I saw a 5 foot gator,
Oh
just
yeah,
in general, I would probably be the same way. But like, I've heard
sure.
different things because I've asked some people, from Florida. I'm like, well, what's going on there? Like, because it might just be like the Jaws thing coming. Just the I don't know if I want to call
No,
it
no, no.
Hollywood, but just the not knowing.
Well, I'll condense this really quick. I've lived around wildlife my whole life. I've taken courses on handling snakes and all this other stuff. And with snakes, they say there's one thing about handling snakes you need to know. It's not if you'll get bit, it's when. Now, alligators, to really get over your fear of animals, you got to know how they feed and how they react. And alligators basically don't associate humans with food unless humans feed them. The thing with a reptile, especially like an alligator, it can't differentiate between the chicken you're feeding it and the hand that's holding the chicken. The moment you start feeding an alligator, you create a relationship, and not a good one, where the alligator identifies people as food. It's not that they want to kill people. It's, once again, an alligator can't distinguish between the hand that has the food and the hand itself. And in a natural environment, alligators, even large alligators, don't want anything to do with people. They won't come around. But in that instant, you need to understand that they're ambush predators. And so in low visibility, if you're entering into a cavern that there may be a gator in, an alligator especially always needs a way to get away from you. And if you get between that alligator and his way to escape, he'll come out biting. It's not the kind of bite where he wants to eat you. It's the kind of bite that he feels trapped and stuff. And I've had several alligator incidents where, especially in swamps, you've got to be very aware of your environment and allow those animals who haven't seen humans, don't associate humans with food, you have to give them that opportunity. Don't get in their way to exit, because that can be dangerous. One time I was excavating a cave in very low visibility. And the week before, there was a tractor trailer tire from a semi in the entrance. It was a small opening, and it was in dark water. And about 5 feet above the dark water was clear. And so I had gone out the week after, and as I go down in the dark water and I go into the opening of this cave, that darn semi truck tire had slid back into the cave. So I grabbed that tire and I start pulling on it in zero visibility, and it wasn't moving. And if anything, it felt like it was moving. And so I kind of put my head back down real close, and I realized I was on the back of about a 13-foot alligator that she had her nose in the cave eating Nile perch or tilapia. And I had thought in the low visibility that it was the tire that had slid back into the cave. And I tell you, I've never made so much distance between me and a reptile, a big alligator like that. And I shot out of the water and got up on the shore, and that poor alligator probably didn't know what happened. I mean, she just had her nose in this like cave opening trying to get fish, and all of a sudden there's something on her back yanking on her. She came up on the opposite side of the canal, and she was every bit of 13 feet long. And there's been a couple of more. There was another cave where I had an alligator come out of a fracture and land on my back. She was about 7 feet. And I didn't see that she had gone up there to get away from me. And all of a sudden I'm just sitting there, and there were logs and stuff. And I keep pushing this thing off of me. And all of a sudden I look over my left shoulder, and I just see a snout with teeth. And I'm like, oh my God, there's an alligator on my back. And this was in a swamp cave. And all of a sudden I was like, my heart literally just jumped in my throat. But instantly that part of me, I knew she wasn't attacking me. And in the low visibility, she didn't even know she was on top of me. And I just kind of leaned forward, and I thought it was a little alligator. And she slid off of my back, and she was like I said, 7 feet long. She had the little coverings up over her eyes. Her back wasn't arched. She wasn't aggressive. She was just trying to get away from what was ever in that cavern zone. And I tell you, that also. But and sharks are the same way. Sharks feed by a number of different ways. I mean, in low visibility, sharks are feeding by their senses. They're this acute sensory that they have in their nose. In clear water, when you're on the same level as they are, they're feeding by sight. but a lot of sharks feed by a peripheral vision when you're on the surface. And I used to be terrified of sharks when I first started, but now I'm realizing that, for a shark to eat a human when they're feeding correctly, it would be like you and I eating cardboard. It's just not something they do naturally. But it's up to you to understand the environment and how those predators might be feeding. If you're in a low visibility environment, you have a high probability of being bit by a shark because they can't tell the difference between you and baitfish, and that, like bull sharks especially. But if you're in the water column and down on their level, and they can physically see who you are, what you are, and they don't associate you with food. In the Bahamas, they do a lot of hand feeding. So just like alligators, the sharks really have a difficult time differentiating between the hand that feeds it and, what they're feeding them and stuff. So understanding the creatures and understanding how they're feeding in the environment is really the best way to protect yourself. But, creatures like that eating people, it's unnatural. And when it happens, it normally happens because they're in an environment where the animal is feeding, in a different kind of way. Sorry for the long exploration, but I get that a lot.
No. This is awesome, man. No, don't be sorry, please, because that's crazy. I don't even know it. Like when you were saying, you just turn and see the snout of the alligator. Just kind of reminds me of the scene from Jurassic Park.
Yeah,
it was. It just pops through.
Yeah, that was before Jurassic Park. That was at a cave called Buford. That was at a cave called Buford Siphon when that happened. But I have a natural fear. When you're moving into those environments for the first time, I'm not thinking about exploring cave. I'm just really carefully. There's been a number of caves out in the swamps here in Florida where I've gone down and there'll just be a big gator, and she's, I always call them she's, but she's just not in a position for me to make progress without blocking her way to get away from me. And I'm like, nope, can't do it. We'll come back some other time.
When you're doing this sort of stuff, are you like solo diving? Like how's your buddy reacting at this point?
Well, I will tell you, I am not a proponent for solo diving when the environment is conducive for two people. But I will say, if we've all been trained about buddies and having buddies, but on the level when it comes to environmental awareness, and you've had a lot of experience diving, and I'll preface that by saying a lot of experiences are never going to carry you through the next one. I always tell people, don't think just because you have a lot of experiences that somehow you're just going to glide through the next one. As far as solo diving, or, in this particular scenario, you're telling me about alligators and how my buddy would feel. No, you look at the environment and you ask yourself this question. Is a buddy going to assist or hinder my ability to stay alive? And especially in side mounting, when you're entering into environments where, well, I've got my buddy with me. He hasn't had good visibility for the last 1,000 feet. He doesn't know where we are. Now I've got to turn out, and we both have to exit. Once again, it's solo diving or being in the water without a buddy. It's something that is really, you learn through a lot of progression. And you weigh the logistics of knowing that will a buddy, especially if you're completely redundant, if you have a redundant air source, if you have a redundant light, and you're attached to a line or whatever, the reality is let's just be honest, if you get knocked out and you have a buddy with you, he's not going to save your life. You're going to drown. When the scenario of a buddy saving a buddy is less than the logistics that a buddy's going to kill you, then I think in those circumstances, solo diving is permissible. And of course, as new divers, you shouldn't be in that situation anyways.
Yeah.
So, and it's not an old explorer or diver saying, don't ever, you got to learn. If you find yourself in a situation where you're entering into an environment where a buddy is just not conducive, as a diver, you need to weigh a lot of things. Have you had enough experience and progressive experiences to know how to, survive without a buddy? Or, whatever. I digress. If there is ever an environment where a buddy is not going to be bad, then you should definitely have a buddy with you. We'll leave it at that.
Okay.
But no, in none of those situations where I was involved with dealing with large reptiles did I have a buddy with me. To answer your question plainly, no, there was no buddy. Okay. I just didn't want to say that and have people go, "Oh, Brett Hemphill thinks solo diving is acceptable." Only Only when negotiating around large reptiles. Yes.
I would imagine it might be kind of hard to find the buddy. Well, maybe not to be like, oh yeah, there's
You'd
a
be
huge.
surprised. There have been several times where I'll come out and I'll go, man, it's just a beautiful cave. Look, as you're going in, there's a 10-foot alligator on the left, but as long as you hang the right wall, and they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, it's not going to bug you. And they're like, screw that. Yeah, anyways.
Oh, that's funny, man. That's great. My next question is, when you started exploring these caves and you started getting further and the dives started getting longer, is that when you started progressing into a rebreather?
I've been diving since deep air and in the industry kind of realizing that helium, when we first started, everyone was convinced that the attributes of decompressing on helium were just not what they were. When helium first came out, people were really, really pushing the oxygen envelope on decompression because we didn't really understand the characteristics of helium as we were coming up. Obviously, we know that's not true now, but with rebreathers, I was probably about 5 years behind the industry when some of the first rebreathers came out because I just wasn't in a scenario. We were learning how to stage lots of bottles, and I think a lot of cave divers here in the United States didn't really embrace the rebreather market when it first came on because there were really no statistics. And for us, and for what cave diving is and has been, it's just this, you do a dive, you go a certain distance or a certain depth, you come out and you say, what do I have to do the next time to make this not so arduous? Can I move the bottle? Can I change the rigging? And so to answer your question, I especially didn't move to rebreathers till I knew enough about them to say that technology has the potential to be rigorous. My biggest concern was, you're looking at rubber hoses and, things that I just thought, boy, you take that into a cave environment, you're just going to tear things and break things and you're going to die. And it wasn't until I had a long opportunity just to studying on my own. And even when I started rebreather diving, I just didn't take it and go to the back of a cave. I really needed to convince myself that the technology was suitable for doing the deep and long dives that we were doing at the time. And I think that's the answer to your question.
Yeah. No. I just, because I'm always just kind of curious that kind of transition when somebody goes from open circuit into closed circuit.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, because that's a great answer.
And I think it still holds true to today. I mean, there are some environments where you don't want to, a rebreather, any equipment has its Achilles heel, which basically means there are more fragile components. And, once again, it's that cognizance that we've kind of discussed. You've got to recognize an environment and recognize if it's suitable for you to keep moving forward. And certainly, is that environment suitable to bring the equipment that you're carrying, the gas you're breathing? Is it suitable to, keep moving forward with the equipment you're using and stuff? And I think when it comes to rebreathers, it's the same thing. But, for myself and the people I dive with, it's always just been this progression. We come back, and we're like, wow, could we go any further? Can we go any deeper? And we come back, and we immediately just start scratching our heads and go, what can we do to ourselves, and what can we do to the equipment to make this more suitable or comfortable? I used to always tell and still tell my friends, I go, it's about staying comfortable because, I'm sure even as open water divers, you'll get into a situation either getting on or off the boat or when you're in the water a long time where you're like, yeah, this just isn't comfortable. It's just really uncomfortable. And the moment you reach a state where you're cold, or anything like that, you suddenly you don't make progress. And so in order to make progress in exploration, you've got to maintain all those variables of warmth, are you hydrated, are your eyes hurting, is your mask too tight, and so I think as an explorer, especially with the people I've been over the years, is we always come back and we're like, what do we need to do to maintain? How were you uncomfortable? Well, I needed this and I needed that, And so I think, especially with karst underwater research in our exploration, it's just been this progression, and even building our own stuff. Dr. Pitkin and myself and Matt, we come back and we're like, it's just so arduous to sit in a bag filling up with carbon dioxide. And we tried pendulum rebreathers, and finally one day Matt and I were sitting there just feeling nauseous on a pendulum rebreather in a little bag, off-gassing. And I was like, why don't we just turn the whole bag into a rebreather? And Matt was like, oh, that's a great idea. And then the next thing you know, we're testing out habitat scrubbers, and all these things, and ways to. We asked ourselves, if we flooded a dry suit, let's make something where we could still have heat even if our dry suit was flooded. And it's the same way with mountain climbing. The moment a climber on a mountain like Everest or K2, the moment you become uncomfortable or have fatigue of any type, you don't make progress. You stop, because if you continue to progress on a Himalayan mountain when you're uncomfortable, no matter what it is, it's a recipe for disaster. And I think it's the same way with deep cave exploration.
Well, that was actually going to be my next question is karst underwater research. Do you want to talk about what's going on there a little bit?
Originally, when I was younger, I had a group called Hydrogeo Environmental, and it was based on coastal caves and some of the caves that I had mentioned earlier that we were finding. And there was two other groups named Karst at that time. West Skiles had Karst Productions and Karst Environmental. And then there was a gentleman in Central Florida named Jeff Peterson who had Karst Underwater Research. Originally, Karst Underwater Research, when Jeff perceived it, it was an organization designed specifically for having access to Weeki Wachee Cave System. Weeki Wachee is a large magnitude spring here on the east coast of Florida. The late 1990s, Jeff just kind of gave it to me, and I had a much larger vision of what karst underwater research could be, because we had a lot of people diving a lot of caves, and there was a lot of well, don't tell anybody about this and don't tell anybody about that. But I'll be honest, we were talking about technology. There was a day and a time when keeping these types of things secret made sense. I think historically, if you didn't want an environment to be ruined and messed up, it was best to keep it secret. In the world we live in today, I think there's a greater opportunity for these incredible things to be lost when people don't know about them. In fact, I've seen many beautiful cave systems and underwater cave systems lost to people building and stuff, and they'll go, hey, you just ruined a cave. And they'll go, what? We never knew there was a cave there. So it's the fine line in karst underwater research that we do. We want the general public to know that these places exist, but at the same time, we're not publicizing them, saying, you should come and dive this or be a part of this. And you have to, sorry I use this word, you have to spin it in such a way where you're not out there going, look at what we're doing, and you can't do it. And I don't want to do that, but I want the general public and the cave diving people to know that these things exist and they need to be protected. I mean, it's a good example. I mean, if there's baby seals that need to be protected, you need to take pictures of baby seals. Even though people may never go to the Arctic and see baby seals, you have to identify the resource in order for people to want to protect it and understand it. And we work with scientists who do all different types of things, but I think we provide samples for them and work with them in going into the environment where they can't go. But I think our number one goal is to really document, survey, and bring awareness to just how many of these incredible underwater conduits and springs and things are here in Florida, especially in Florida. We've done stuff, all around, but because everything's changing. I mean, even here in Florida, I see springs that used to be just absolutely clear. I mean, like gin clear. And now you see them, and they're still clear, but they're kind of green, and they're changing. And, I just want to create a baseline for all these different springs and cave systems so that people can look back and say, here's what they really looked like when, back then or back here. So I think that's kind of our number one mission statement is protection through documentation.
No, that's awesome. No, I've been following it for a little bit. You know, like I said, slowly kind of getting into this karst cave world. So I'll definitely have to do more research
Yeah,
on my own.
especially
So
where you are. Yeah.
yeah, no, definitely, yeah. It's there. I definitely feel that there's a lot of exploration. I mean, you were even kind of telling me there's some stuff going on in southern Vietnam.
Southern Vietnam, Taiwan, it's just these massive karst. I think a lot of the karst in those areas are you're basically at the lowest gradient of stuff that's happening on a higher gradient, but just massive. Even a lot of the stuff in Songhong in China, it's hard to dive, it's big, it's deep, but I think it's important to start documenting these. I call them frontiers because that's really what they are. If you don't document a frontier when you find it, like I said, people just aren't going to understand the magnitude of what it is.
Last couple of questions for you before I let you go.
Sure.
You just have a day off. You want to go for a fun dive. What's a go-to spot for you? Is it? I'm assuming it's a cave. I mean, is it ocean? I don't know.
That's a tough question. It's a tough question. I still, after all these years, I don't really have the zeal. I mean, I love exploring, but I'll be honest. A day off for me is really trying to nurture some of the. We have a lot of great young explorers right now, cave explorers, and I hate the word mentoring. I don't know why, but mentoring has become a dirty word. Nobody wants to be mentored by anybody, so I don't use it. But on a day off for me, I like to take good, experienced cave divers to places that they haven't been and try to get them to really embrace the philosophy and the idea that there are still places to explore, there's still frontiers to find, but the days of just going in and laying line and going, hey, guess what I did? I laid line. Once again, I think nurturing our future explorers to document these places in all capacities, video, survey, working with scientists. I think that's really the future. And on any given day, whether or not it's in the Gulf or on some tiny obscure river or out in a swamp dodging gators, I love to take good, experienced cave divers who have a really vested future in this type of activity and show them these things that I've found and also show them that there's things that still have to be found and explored in these frontiers that exist beneath our feet.
Okay, no, that's an amazing answer, which actually I don't think you answered my next question, but my last question I usually like to end off with is advice to these newer divers. So you're talking to a diver. Me in particular, I'm
Sure.
not a cave diver, but I'm looking to get into it. I usually put it out there like, what are some pieces of advice you would give to yourself when you were younger, getting into this whole world? Don't do this, definitely do this.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
what are some pieces of advice you'd like to give?
I have to preface this. Years ago, I would have said progression. But now you just can't say that. We were talking about social media and all these things and stuff. And I think new cave divers, sometimes it's important to unplug. And I'm not sure, Nick, when you go to these places, don't think about when you're diving and being progressive with cave diving especially. Try not to think about the next post that you're going to be underwater going, wow, I can't wait to post this. Don't allow social media and the things that you see to elevate or move your progression any faster than it should be occurring naturally. I think that's the biggest problem with all young explorers today is they can't substantiate the difference between natural progression and the anticipation of what they're seeing online. It's an unfortunate truth that a lot of the exploration that I've done, people have gone back to where I've been and gone on exploration lines that I and my friends have put in, and they've perished. And I lay in my bed at night and I ask myself this question: Is it my fault that these people died in a place in an underwater cave that I found or I explored? And I have to come to peace with it. But the one thing, to go back to your question, don't be afraid to get away from that perception of, well, that person did it, I should be able to do it. Ask questions. If you're going to be a cave diver and you're just really influenced or feel, like, wow, I really want to do this, try to stay away from the social media. Try to get a good understanding of your own ability and how that ability will progress. And don't allow the videos, don't allow the articles to move you any faster than the progression that's naturally inside of you, really. And just try to separate that. And then once again, be progressive without allowing any of those external things to, motivate you any quicker than you would be motivated naturally. That's my advice.
No, that's good advice, man. No, that really is, especially because there's obviously two sides to that coin. There's good things about social media because you can get that awareness out there. You can get things out there, but then you can also, a lot of people can get influenced by it, in the wrong ways. And it is. Definitely that's a great answer because I'm sure that there's a lot of people that got into the type of diving that they're into because of social media, and they're pushing themselves way too fast.
I was going to say another way to think about it is ambition. Just make sure that your ambition is coming from inside and it is not ambition created by what you're seeing, in social media and on videos, because we all have a natural ambition. Like I said, we talked about my friend Doug Ebersol. He didn't realize his ambition to do this till he went and experienced that. I think it's okay to see the diving in Mexico and the Yucatan and go, hey, I want to experience that. But once you get to that level where you're kind of progressing, I think progression should be ambition that comes from inside, and it shouldn't be something that you're watching and going, wow, I saw this video where these guys were 2,000 feet back down this tunnel. Let's go there. Don't let yourself be drawn into that. Just don't let yourself be drawn into that. That's my advice.
That's great advice, man. No, that's really good advice. And to be honest, that's kind of one of the things, because, I've been diving, I don't know, maybe about 6 or 7 years now, and my progression into the tech world has been pretty slow, getting into, I just recently took my, I did my intro to tech like 2 years ago, but I actually did the advanced nitrox decompression procedures earlier this year, and it kind of makes, it opens up that door, and I'm just thinking like, man, it'd be crazy, there's people pushing, 100-meter dives, like you're saying, people going that far back into caves, and that definitely raises some hairs for me, man. I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready for something like that. But what appeals to me is the skill level that it takes for people to do that. And that's kind of what appeals to me. Like, I want to be that good. I don't necessarily want to be the guy pushing the limits and exploring. But it definitely, it probably just slowly comes with that progression. Like, oh, I got a little bit better. I did this a little bit more. This is pretty awesome. So I'll push it.
This will be my 33rd year since my cave certification. so I'm not preaching. It's taken a long time. And the great thing is even at my age, some of the biggest dives in my life are happening now. And that, like I said earlier, with the knowledge we have and the ability to stay comfortable, I couldn't have done these things. I'm so fortunate as an explorer and a diver to have been living during this transition of air, deep air, helium, rebreather, and to have these frontiers kind of open up and stuff. So it's an exciting time to be living in, and I think even for young explorers, with the new frontiers opening up, like I said there in Asia and even all around the world with this technology, I think young explorers who find that ambition here inside versus convincing themselves it's something they want to do online, but it's going to be some exciting times in the next decades for young overhead environment exploration guys doing it. I'm excited to watch because I'm the same. I met a lot of old guys when I was young. In fact, here in Florida, sorry to keep going, but
no, you're good, man. You're good.
A lot of the older cave divers in Florida had a saying, and the saying was, "Leave nothing for the next generation." And it's the opposite for me. I'm excited. I mean, people always go, "Are you angry that guy extended the end of your exploration?" And I'm like, no, actually, I think that's fantastic. Just to know that it keeps going. I may be different in that aspect, but I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens here in the next 20 years with a lot of this long-range exploration that's being done. So we'll see.
Awesome. No, I'm very much looking forward to see, especially with what you have future projects, I'm sure. So, seeing what Carson Underwater Research is doing. And it's going to be exciting to see that exploration going down. Well, awesome, man. I really, really want to thank you very much for coming on to the podcast today.
Well, thank you, Nick. I really had a good time. I love revisiting the past and looking into the future. It's been great talking to you.
Off-gassing, a scuba podcast.